Great, thanks, Zane. So I am going to hand over to just a moment to David from UKRI, and David's going to talk a bit about the background and context of the Community Knowledge Fund. We're aware that some people may not be as familiar with UKRI as others, so we want to make sure you understand where this fund is coming from, what it's hoping to respond to that we're seeing out in the world, and really to meet the funder. So over to you, David.
Thanks, Charlene. And yeah, hi everyone. Again, really nice to be here this evening and great to see so much interest in the fund. So yeah, as Charlene said, I'm just going to give a bit of a background to who UKRI are and why we're interested in this area and where this fund came from, basically. So UKRI stands for UK Research and Innovation, and we're quite a large government arm's length body, basically a research funder. So we invest about £8 billion a year all across the UK, mainly in kind of high intensity research institutions like universities and research centres, and also in businesses. So thinking about research and innovation in quite a broad way. Now, our vision as an organisation is for an outstanding research and innovation system that gives everyone the opportunity to contribute and to benefit, enriching lives locally, nationally, and internationally. So making the world better through research and innovation in a nutshell. So over the last few years, since UKRI was formed, which was back in 2018, we've been sort of rethinking our approach to what we generally call public engagement. So, you know, how the public contributes to, gets involved with, interacts with the work that we do ourselves and the work that we fund. And we've been developing a new strategy in that area, and that new strategy is coming out very soon. And in that time, we've kind of gone out and spoken to lots of different partners. We've listened to people who've been involved in these kinds of engagement projects. We've been talking to people who've been taking new approaches, really learning from that existing practice and seeing what we can do differently and where the sector needs to go next, really. And basically through that sort of investigation and through talking to lots of different people, we heard a few things again and again about the way that engagement tends to work with traditional forms of research and innovation. And some of the things were that often this work is led by professional researchers in a professional research organisation, and they are kind of own the budget and the money and what the topic is, and so it's really owned by those professional institutions and not really by people outside. It's often quite short term and not really with much support in terms of making the activity sustainable or allowing people to really learn from the practice that they were funded to do. And because of the way that those things are set up, there's a kind of limited role for people out in the community or the public that the researchers or the university is trying to actually engage with, and people see that as a real limiting factor on the impact that can be achieved, the good things that we can produce through these kinds of processes because of the way that funding is delivered and those projects are set up. So this fund is kind of part of a way for us to try and reframe some of that. So we're trying to basically flip that dominant approach of, you know, a researcher coming up with an idea and then going out and engaging community, and instead trying to get some money into communities through community organisations to fund those kinds of ideas that don't normally get funded through traditional approaches. And, you know, whilst community organisations and charities and all the sorts of organisations that you represent aren't traditionally seen as part of research and innovation, we see them as having a really crucial role in kind of connecting and empowering communities in these types of projects. So that's kind of where the main basis for this call comes from. And I hope that the themes that we've got in the call, which I'm sure Charlene will talk about, kind of reflect some of the priorities that you have, but we also have this open theme with this call as well, so that the ideas coming from the communities themselves and from the places that you're from kind of can be brought into this and really change the types of research that we would traditionally fund. So the funding itself, as Charlene's already hinted at, it's kind of about exploring ideas, about testing methods, and really learning from that. And we hope that the work that the Young Foundation are doing alongside the grants themselves will kind of support you through that iterative process and make sure that you're kind of learning as you go and getting a chance to build on your work and learn from that and build that into your own practice. And as I mentioned, this is just one fund as part of a bigger program of work that we're doing in this area. Someone I see has already mentioned the community research networks. That's another fund that we're supporting. We're also looking at professional development for people working in this area as well. And we've got a few other things coming up over the next few years. So it's a real area of interest for us at the moment. So yeah, I hope that was a helpful kind of background to the call. And yeah, as I say, great to see so many of you here. We're looking forward to seeing what comes in and kind of going with you on that journey through the next kind of 18 months or so.
Perfect. Thanks, David. And yeah, I think lovely way to summarize that, going on a journey together. I think that really embodies what we're hoping to do with a really nice group and cohort of grantees. So thank you for a bit of background context to kind of where the fund has stemmed from and a bit about who UKRI is and their strategy and direction of travel going forward. I'm going to jump us now into a bit less of the why and a bit more of the how, if you like. So I'm going to try to give you a really good overview of the fund as succinctly as possible, but specifically this will hopefully answer some of those questions around eligibility, the support that's on offer, and we can't tell you what the perfect application looks like, but we can hopefully tell you what the fund is looking for in terms of themes and kind of approach to creating impact through generating knowledge. So I think first thing to say, you're probably going to hear some conceptual terms throughout this over the next hour. So words like innovation and resilience and community. And these are words that mean lots of different things to lots of different people. Yes, we will come to the focus area in just a moment. And we at the Young Foundation and UKRI have definitely explored these, but really what we want to do is work closer with communities to understand how these concepts present themselves and how they play out. So take that and hold that in your mind as you listen to kind of the overview in a moment. And we have given some insight to those already on the FAQ page. So if you are keen to hear our thoughts on it, jump on there and you can have a look after this. I'm going to ask Zane to just take us through a couple slides that I'll speak to. So first, what is the Community Knowledge Fund? So David has given it a really good overview, but essentially it comes down to this being a new fund available for community groups and organizations around the UK. And the fund, like David said, is looking to develop and test ideas and different approaches to creating, to sharing, and to using community knowledge to really make progress on challenges. And somebody asked a bit about what do we mean by challenges. We've got some ideas of challenges we want to focus on, but we also want to hear what challenges are important to your communities. So we'll talk about that in a moment. I think it's helpful to give you a bit of a timeline of where we've been, where we are, and where we're headed. This is top level. Obviously, the fund launched in September, so that was for phase 1, expression of interest window opened. It stays open until the 7th of November, so you've still got a nice chunk of time to kind of work on that EOI and think about what ideas you might want to put forward. And we'll close the expression of interest in November. We probably are going to have lots of interest, and that's really exciting. So we'll turn those around, and we're really aiming to award the grants in late January 2023. There is a phase 2, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. The funding and more information for that will be available probably in May 2023, so spring next year. And then obviously the fund will carry us through until October 2024, and we could talk about what will happen kind of up until that point. So that's a bit of the timeline, hope to give you an idea of kind of what's coming up. So this one, I think we've seen eligibility as a word in the chat pop up quite a few times already. So I'm going to try to be as clear as we can here. The first thing to say, who is it for? Communities, with an exclamation mark. This fund is for communities. and for communities in particular that really want to explore new ways of creating knowledge, new ways of using knowledge and sharing it. So community takes a lot of different forms. This fund is interested in what community as a word means to you, but it doesn't necessarily refer to a single defined geography or location. So it could refer to communities of interest, if you like. So that's important for us to say. We do have a clear list on our website of eligible groups. So you can see them listed there up at the top. And that goes from charitable trusts, charities, CICs, social enterprises, all the way through. So you can take a look at that on our website, and it's all clearly set out. We do welcome unincorporated community groups, but there is a section in the EOI where you can clearly state who will essentially sponsor that work. So a constituted group that would be happy to kind of hold the funding on their behalf. We very much welcome partnerships. Thank you, Ken. Great to see that excitement for that. That's awesome. We do welcome partnerships, but the partnerships, all partners need to be from that list of eligible community groups and organizations as well. And within the OI, we've given you space to list any partners that would be included in the work. So that brings to that final bullet point there. So this is not open to formal research sector, so not to universities or institutions of higher ed. It's for community groups who are really interested in kind of learning and sharing, and the hope is that those groups and their learning will then be able to kind of shape research and innovation from their own perspective. That's probably as clear as I could be without going into one-to-one conversation. If you do feel like you're in a situation where you still don't feel clear on eligibility, stick around. We'll give you all of the places where you can come and ask really specific questions about your organization or your group and whether or not you're eligible. So we can make sure that we'll pick all of those up in the end of this call or in separate spaces and have a really in-depth conversation about your sort of particular situation. Zane, can you tick us on a bit? Great, thanks. So what's available in phase one? So this is a phased grant program. There's two phases. The first phase really aims to support grantees to create the conditions, if you like, for research and innovation. So kind of to develop and begin to test their ideas. So that early testing phase. So the pot of funding here, I think somebody asked why the pot of funding was a bit smaller than the research network. So this is a developmental phase. So the grants of up to £10,000 are smaller because we're not asking for as much back from groups. So the EOI form is hopefully a bit simpler, a bit more straightforward. But alongside that funding, what's also included is a learning and support package from the Young Foundation. And that feels really important to us to make sure that there's not just funding that sits, but that actually we're working with grantees to kind of shape what type of learning offer they might need, what type of coaching support would be helpful. And when we talk about ideas, new ideas and testing ideas, we've had a couple questions of what do we mean by that? So what kind of ideas? I can see lots of questions in the chat of, is my idea right? I want to know if this idea would be suitable. So when we think about innovative ideas, there's lots of ways, again, that you can approach that word innovation. So it may be that something is innovative because it is new to those who are undertaking the work. It could be something brand new and unique to the world. Appreciate those things are often a bit more rare, so we're not really pitching in that space, but if you've got a brand new idea, we'd love to hear it. It could be because you're kind of embodying the core innovation competencies, so agility and curiosity and adaptability. Or it could be a new kind of partnership. So I think somebody, Ken asked in the chat there, around different people coming together and organizing themselves in a new way. So new partnerships or new patterns of organizing are definitely innovative in this space. So I want to talk a bit about the support package now, Zane, if you could tick us on a little bit. So as I said, in addition to the funding, there's a bespoke support package that will be delivered by the Young Foundation, and that includes kind of three key elements. So a learning program, coaching support, and national learning and sharing events. And why this feels important to this fund is because we know that if we can support communities to build research and innovation skills, where it may be very new to some organizations and groups, then we can build their capacity. So we're trying to create a really safe, supportive space within this fund that will allow grantees to take safe risks and to experiment with different ways of creating and using their knowledge. The learning and sharing events are really an opportunity to connect with others and to kind of showcase and profile the impact of your work. So essentially increasing how community research and innovation is valued by the formal research and innovation system. And ultimately, we hope that this will lead to more funding for this type of community-led research and innovation. So that's the support package. We could talk more about that in depth once we kind of have the group in place. I think one of the key things for us as well is that this package is informed by the cohort of grantees that come through. So we could sit down and design it and then say, here, this is what's on offer, or we could work alongside you and say, what's important to you, what skills, what capabilities, what capacity do you want to grow? Great, thanks, Zane. If you'll tick on, we'll chat a bit about the 3 different themes. So as David said, this fund is taking a thematic approach, and these themes came from research that was done by the Young Foundation and UKRI. And it was important to us to give the fund focus, but at the same time, we want to hear what is important to communities. So we created an open category. So there's an open fund element to this that hopefully will surprise some of us and create a space for you to tell us what's important to the communities where you're working or that you're working with. Safety and resilience was chosen as one of the themes because that was the single biggest issue that was cited as important to UK communities, and that's within the Institute for Community Studies report, Safety in Numbers, which we can share the link to that, and you can also find that on our website. So these are the 3 themes. We'll have a bit of space just a little bit later to break out into breakout rooms and kind of chat about what these mean to you and what ideas are surfacing within each of these. So hold on to your ideas for that space. Zane, if you could tick us along. Perfect. So we've had a few questions around what would make a strong application or the ideal application. We've tried to design an expression of interest form that will hopefully elicit that from you. So these are really the questions that we're looking for. The EOI is divided into 2 sections. So the first is around eligibility. Essentially, these are a yes or no kind of answer. So your organization needs to come from one of our listed eligible organizations. You need to select one of the themes, and within the open category, we've given you some space to tell us kind of what your theme is within that. And then you'll be able to tell us about your community. So as I talked about that earlier, is that a community of interest? Is it a place? Give us a bit of an insight into what that is. The second set of questions, there's 5 questions there that ask about suitability. You can go find all of these questions on our website. There's a word count attached to them, which we hope will not daunt you, but also give you the space to kind of let shine your ideas and tell us what you're thinking about. But really, if you can answer these questions, bringing sort of your ideas forward, and we'll talk a bit about some of the sort of 3 key things we think we'd like to see through these, then I think you'll set yourself up in a good space to put in a strong application. So I would encourage you to go have a look on the website, take a look at these, think about what information you need to pull forward to answer these to the best of your ability. Great, Zane, could you? So the other thing just to say about moving from phase 1 to phase 2, and kind of before we go into that, I think the other key thing is around the funding decisions. So somebody asked in the chat there around how the kind of cohort will be built. So beyond the eligibility and suitability, we'll also be looking at a range of organizations kind of across the whole fund portfolio. And this means we want a really mixed portfolio of community groups to kind of balance engagement and representation across the UK. And this will be incredibly helpful to share learning, to kind of think about where we can draw on other skills and experiences and share good practice where it's happening across the UK. So phase 2, I'm not going to say too much about this, but we do want to kind of give you an idea of where phase 1 grants can grow. So I think somebody asked if this is a fund that can help you scale. So if you've been testing something early, I would say yes, but all applications first need to come through the groundwork and phase 1 application process. So you cannot at this point apply for phase 2. You have to go through phase 1 first. And the reason is we think there's some really key things to kind of building partnerships or establishing relationships, creating the conditions to actually really test, to learn from the knowledge you're creating and to iterate your ideas. So everyone will come through phase 1 first. Where ideas are really showing promise from early testing, they'll be eligible in spring next year for further funding. So that could either be grants up to £50,000 or for grants up to £100,000. There will be a different process for applying for that. And as you can imagine, the rigor around kind of how we put different grants through will increase as the funding increases. So right now we've tried to create a really simple, straightforward application process to bring lots of grantees in. And as we try to move some through to that invest and sort of scale stage, then yeah, we'll put in a bit more rigor and a bit more accountability for how that fund is going to be spent. But I would say the questions in there around scaling, yes, you do have to come through phase 1 first though. Great, I'm going to pause there for just a moment because I've been talking